And hello, everybody, and welcome to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host, Christian Renteria. Thank you very much for joining me this week. We have a pretty impressive news week this week, ladies and gentlemen. It is, it's pretty impressive. So before all that, I want to mention I didn't do a podcast last week. That's my bad. I actually started recording one, but something came up. It was a personal matter, so I had to stop recording, and there wasn't really enough to really, justify putting out a podcast, so I didn't put it out. So I'm sorry for that, and I'm here this week to put out this. And even this week's podcast will be going up a little bit earlier than usual. Obviously, if you're listening to, or depending on when you're actually listening to the podcast. But yeah, it's going up a little bit earlier than usual. Got some stuff going on this weekend, which is very rare for me, but there you go. Alright, so let's get to the news items that came out last week. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about all the news items that came out last week. I'm just going to talk about a few of them, or I think even just a couple of them. Just two of them that really popped out last week. Elizabeth Banks may join the Ocean's 11 spinoff. We'll talk about that a little bit later because there was a news item that came out this week for that. So Elizabeth Banks may be joining that cast. Of course, Elizabeth Banks. I actually didn't talk about this because it was last week. Elizabeth Banks departed the Pitch Perfect 3 director's chair, so she'll no longer be directing that. So, because her schedule's all busy because she's big time now. Not making fun of Elizabeth Banks. I like Elizabeth Banks. But yeah, her schedule got busy, so she kind of had to leave, and now she's moving on to other projects. This looks like it's going to be one of them. Now again, she may join. The report comes from Showbiz 101 that reported that Helena Bonham Carter and Mindy Kaling will be joining the cast of this film, but they updated the report saying that Banks would be also joining, or likely to join the group, as they put it. So it's not a done deal just yet. Mindy Kaling and Helena Bonham Carter will be joining the cast, so we don't have to worry about that, but that's what they got going on. And Banks, if she joins the film, it kind of makes sense. She was in the first Hunger Games movie. Gary Ross will be directing this movie, so that's why it makes sense. And she was also in Gary Ross's 2003 drama Seabiscuit. So they've worked together. They have a good working relationship. So it would make sense if she would join in the cast. And again, we're going to talk about Ocean's 11 spinoff more. It's officially called Ocean's 8. It was originally called online, unofficially, Ocean's Ocho. I don't know where it came from, but that's what it was. But Gary Ross did an interview, and again, we'll talk about that a little bit later on the podcast. And he said that the film is called Ocean's 8 and not Ocean's Ocho. The second news item that came out last week that I want to talk about with you guys is Doug Liman may direct the adaptation of Chaos Walking. Now, Doug Liman is keeping busy because he was supposed to direct the Gambit movie for 20th Century Fox, but they have delayed that movie for the foreseeable future because they want to get the script right. So they're just, there's even no, they took it off its release schedule. It was supposed to come out, I think this year, or I think it was this year, and they're like, yeah, we're not going to make it, so we're just going to delay it, and they haven't given it a new release date just yet. So he's keeping busy. He's already set to direct a sharpshooter standoff film called The Wall with Aaron Taylor Johnson. Most people probably know him as Kick-Ass, or he was in the Marvel Cinematic Universe when he played Pietro Maximoff. And now Doug Liman is eyeing the director's chair for the young adult post-apocalyptic thriller adaptation of Chaos Walking. The novel series, which have different subtitles, are written by Patrick Ness, and the film is actually written by Charlie Kaufman, who of course wrote the excellent film Eternal Sunshine of Spotless Mind. Although he wrote the first draft of the script, and they have a new draft of the script written by Jamie Linden, who wrote Money Monster, which was kind of an uneven movie, but still, I'm sure most of Kaufman's script will still be there. Anyway, for those not familiar with Chaos Walking, the story takes place in a world devoid of women. where all living creatures can hear one another's thoughts in a stream of images, words, and sounds called noise. When a young boy suddenly stumbles upon a young silent girl, they set off on a dangerous journey full of twists and turns. The film was originally going to be directed by Robert Zemeckis, but it appears that he's no longer attached to the film, and the studio is thinking about letting Doug Liman take over while they figure out the whole Gambit situation. Now, reports say the studio is aiming to start filming this fall, so if that's the case, we'll probably be hearing more about Chaos Walking in the foreseeable future. And the Chaos Walking, I've actually been wanting to read the books, and I have the books on my Kindle. I just haven't gotten to it yet. I really want to, read them because I've heard nothing but great things about these books. So hopefully, if you're a fan of the books, this is probably maybe either good or bad news for you. Who knows? But I'm interested in seeing what they kind of bring to. I mean, the synopsis and the concept itself sounds great. It really does. So I hope that they make it as good as the books once I read the books. Or if you're a fan of the books, hopefully that they reach your expectations if they ever did a live action adaptation. All right, so let's get to this week's news items before I keep rambling. So the first news item we're going to talk about this week is there could be more Shrek movies on the way. Yes, more Shrek movies.
Oh, come on!
Because, why not? DreamWorks Animation is in the midst of being acquired by NBC Universal, and speaking at the Guggenheim TMT Symposium in New York, the NBC Universal Chief Executive Steve Burke revealed that more Shrek sequels are definitely part of the studio's plans, saying he is creatively trying to help us figure out how to resurrect Shrek. The he is referring to is one of the producers for Illumination Entertainment, who of course did the Despicable Me movies. They're doing The Secret Life of Pets, which is coming out I believe in a few weeks. So they're doing that. So that's the plan right now. Before you go, yelling cash grab or whatever, and it kind of is. Shrek was a highly lucrative property when it came out. And despite the quality of the last film, Shrek the Third, which wasn't really that good of a film as its sequels, again, it's still a big property, and I think there's still a fan base for it. I mean, it's not going to be as big of a fan base as it was. Shrek has still been staying in the mainstream with like straight to video little snippets or straight to TV stuff. So, I mean, it's not totally out of the realm of possibilities, but I don't know what they could possibly do with more Shrek films. We'll see what happens. And of course, the main thing is if they can bring back the cast, if they can bring back Mike Myers and Eddie Murphy and Cameron Diaz, and if they bring back Puss in Boots, Antonio Banderas, it's going to be interesting to see what direction they go with and how they go with potentially making more Shrek films. The next news item we have is Anthony Mackie is set to play Johnny Cochran. Now, it is the anniversary of the O.J. Simpson trial, and obviously the O.J. Simpson is in the news a lot. There was the American Horror Story, American Crime Story with Cuba Gooding Jr., and there's ESPN is running I think it's a 30 for. I think it is actually a 30 for 30. I don't think it's just like an ESPN documentary. I think it's a 30 for 30 on OJ that they're doing. But yeah, OJ's back in the news. Probably not the best way, but it's there. So, but this isn't following O.J. Simpson, of course. But I mentioned O.J. because obviously Johnny Cochran was one of his lawyers at the time, and Johnny Cochran in and himself is a very big name, and was a very big name. And it looks like Justin Chadwick, who directed the Mandela movie that came out, I believe 2 years ago, the one with Idris Elba. He's finalizing a deal to direct an untitled film that will be about the Signal Hill police brutality case in 1981. And for those of you guys that don't know about the case, I'm just going to give you guys just pretty much a quick, gritty rundown of what it was. Johnny Cochran, of course, was the lawyer for this case. So he represented a football player called Ron Settles, who was picked up for speeding in Signal Hill in the Los Angeles County. and shortly after he was arrested. And it's kind of eerie that this is still a thing that's going on today. He was found hanged in his cell, and the police called it a suicide. And an autopsy later on that I don't think was done by the District of Los Angeles, I think it was done by someone else. They found that he had been choked to death, and his family was awarded, money in a civil suit, and the police chief resigned, and reforms were mandated. But it's still, this was coming. This was in 1981, so this was still a time where it was the race riots and everything else that you can possibly think of, and that we've seen, and that we've heard, and stuff that's been kind of eerily mirrored to what's going on today. And I don't want to get political on the podcast because it's not what this podcast is about, but it's kind of hard not to see the juxtaposition of these two things going on. But nonetheless, he's doing a movie about that. Johnny Cochran was the lawyer that represented John Settles and all this, and his family and everything. So Anthony Mackie is set to play him. There's no word yet on when the film will go into production. There's no word yet on how the film will handle the material. There's no point of view just yet, but I think with Mackie set to lead, Mackie kind of, he doesn't really get, I think, a lot of the praise that he deserves, because I think most people just see him as the Falcon in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And he does fine as the Falcon, as Sam Wilson. But he's had other great performances outside the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it'd be kind of interesting to see him play this role. I think it'd be pretty cool to see that. So, obviously, once this project gets underway, we don't know when it's going to get going. I will talk about it more. But do yourself a favor, and if you want to know more about this case, again, it's eerily similar to what's going on today. Obviously there's a lot of stuff going on today, and with race, obviously. But I don't want to get into it on the podcast because it's not what this podcast is about. But there's a great juxtaposition, not great, but there's a juxtaposition between these two instances. All right, let's move on. Craig Gillespie is directing the Tanya Harding film that already has Margot Robbie attached. And for those not in the know, or just don't remember the name Tanya Harding was a figure skater that may or may not, I'll use that term loosely, attacked fellow skater Nancy Kerrigan. And I say may or may not because some people say she did it, which she probably did. But I don't know. I don't know. And then there's people out there that think that she didn't do it, and Nancy Kerrigan was, off for attention or whatever. I don't know why she would break her own leg, but whatever. So anyway, the project is currently being titled I, Tanya, and Margot Robbie, of course, which I think we all know who she is by now, is set to play Tanya Harding, and Craig Gillespie is set to direct. And now Gillespie is one of those underrated directors in Hollywood that I don't think gets enough work as he should. I think he should be getting more work. He's one of those great directors that he kind of, has his off and on years when he's directing stuff. He broke onto the scene with the film Lars and the Real Girl, which starred Ryan Gosling. He directed episodes of The United States of Terra, which is the TV show. He directed the very, at least in my opinion, underrated remake of Fright Night with Colin Farrell and Alton Yelchin, which, again, it's underrated in my opinion because it's actually probably one of the better remakes out there. He also directed $1 Million Arm that had John Hamm, and he most recently directed The Finest Hours with Chris Pine about the National Guard movie that came out earlier this year. And he's just one of those directors that I think that, his name gets brought up every now and then, like on a short list, but he's never really broken out. I mean, The Finest Hours, okay, that's not, I don't think that you automatically think, oh, The Finest Hours, Craig Gillespie. No. But he's one of those directors that's really good in what he does, and the films he's done that I've seen, Lars and the Real Girl, Fright Night. I didn't see The Finest Hours. It's on my watch list. I wanted to watch. I just never got around to watching it in theaters. But he's just one of those great directors that I think doesn't get enough credit, and he should. And I think this is kind of a cool film that will probably put him back on the map. And of course, Margot Robbie, she does no wrong. She's a great actress in everything she does. She's one of the best things about kind of anything she's in, really. So we'll see what happens with this. Steven Spielberg may direct a Walter Cronkite Vietnam War-centric drama. Now, Steven Spielberg is currently very busy with the BFG coming out soon. He's prepping for the adaptations of Ready Player One and another movie, a memoir movie called The Kidnapping of Edgardo Montero, and of course he's going to be directing Indiana Jones 5. So you can't, you probably, with that kind of docket, you're like, you can't possibly fit another movie in, right? Well, you're wrong, because he can. Because he's Steven Spielberg. He's the beard. He can do whatever the hell he wants. Reports are saying that Spielberg is eyeing to direct an untitled film that would follow the legendary newscaster Walter Cronkite. More specifically, Cronkite's relationship with the Vietnam War, as he was a significant figure at the time, and he pretty much kind of turned the public opinion on the controversial conflict of this, very controversial war that was the Vietnam War. Now, Cronkite even went to Southeast Asia and saw the effects of the war himself, to which he did an editorialized broadcast, making one of the first opinionated reports on U.S. TV news. Now, this is a big deal when it happened. I remember seeing part of that broadcast that he did, because a history teacher brought it in once, and we sat down, we watched it, and it was very powerful. And Walter Cronkite, again, he's one of there's a reason why he gets the legendary tag in front of it, because he was one of the most, he's obviously no longer alive, but he was one of the most respected, news anchors of the time, and still is now. I mean, it's true. So, I think this could be another, great, this could be another great addition to the Spielberg filmography, and if he wants to let him do it, I think this is kind of a really good property or story, not property because it's not based off a property, but it's a really good story, and it's something that you can be like, yeah, this is Steven Spielberg. This is what he does. He's gonna be reuniting with one of his Bridge of Spies co-writers, Matt Charman, who actually pitched the idea to Spielberg during the awards circuit for Bridge of Spies, because it was nominated for an Oscar, and it was nominated for a bunch of awards, obviously. But it seems like it's finally finding ground. Obviously, Bridge of Spies came out last year, but the film is still in the very early stages, and we probably won't hear anything from this in a while. Again, considering how busy Spielberg's docket is at the moment. But I think this is prime material for Spielberg to be like, I want another Oscar, or another Oscar nomination. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But I'm sure, if he does this, we'll be talking about Oscar nominations for the beard once again. All right, moving on to some comic book news. Donald Glover is in talks for Spider-Man Homecoming, and the internet squeals with excitement. That sounded like I was making fun of you guys. I was not. The Hollywood Reporter reports that Community star Donald Glover is in talks to join the new Spider-Man film. Spider-Man Homecoming, which already has the cast of Tom Holland set to play the hero, will be directed by John Watts, and it will also star Robert Downey Jr., Marissa Tomei, and possibly Michael Keaton, along with others like Zendaya, Tony Revolori, and Michael Barbelli, Kenneth Cho, and Laura Harry. Glover now is in talks to play an unspecified role, at least for the moment. Now, Glover's casting is exciting for sure. Donald Glover is a great actor. He was hilarious in Community. He was great in The Martian. But his casting cannot go unnoticed, because if you remember back in 2011, I think it was 2011, there was a social media campaign to get Donald Glover casted as Spider-Man in the movies. This is before Andrew Garfield got casted as of course Peter Parker when they did The Amazing Spider-Man. So they wanted him to be cast in the movie, and Glover kind of got behind the movement a little bit. He was really going for it as well, but of course nothing happened. It was cool, but again, nothing happened. And there was the rumors and the campaign kind of wanted him to play Miles Morales. So You really can't not talk about Donald Glover being cast in Spider-Man Homecoming and not think about that campaign that came out. Again, there's no word yet on who he will play, but it's still exciting. I mean, even if he doesn't play Miles Morales, or he's playing some other sort of character that is either a good guy or a bad guy, it's still kind of exciting to have him involved, because he's been wanting to be in the Spider-Man universe for a while. So it's cool. A Sicario 3 film is already in the works, and the sequels are said to be standalone films. Now, earlier this month, it was reported, and we talked about here on the podcast, that Sicario will be getting a sequel called Soldado, which was Spanish for soldier. And we'll have a new director in Stefano Sollima, and it will bring back Josh Brolin and Benicio del Toro, and would focus on del Toro's character, which was one of, not even and arguably, if you want to say, one of the best characters in Sicario. And now, in an interview with The Independent, this new director, Saluma, has given some new details on not only Soldado, but also future films. Now, speaking about the sequel to Sicario, he says it's not really a sequel. It's absolutely a standalone movie, a completely different story with just two of the characters that you met in Sicario. The reason that I love Soldado is because it's not exactly a sequel. It's something you can catch and enjoy even if you haven't watched the first one. And then he goes on to say the antagonists are absolutely the main characters, talking about Benicio del Toro and Josh Brolin's character. And he mentioned that Emily Blunt's character from the first film was never actually meant to return for this next installment, but saying that she could possibly pop up in the third movie if they go ahead and do that. Now, when it comes to Sicario 3, he said the idea is to make 3 anthology movies with some of the core actors and set in the same world. So that's a pretty cool idea, to be honest. I mean, it's not he's making it sound like it's not a direct sequel. So it sounds like either it could be years after the first film, or have a completely new direction and set of characters, but still have these guys, Benicio del Toro and Josh Brolin, still playing the same characters from Sicario, but dealing with new characters and new threats along the way, which I think is kind of cool. I mean, Sicario, it was one of those movies where when I found out there was going to be a sequel, and they announced the sequel, they announced sequel talks before the film came out, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. And then I saw the film, and I thought to myself, well, this isn't really a movie that warrants a sequel. It's a great standalone movie. But at the same time, again, Benicio del Toro was one of, if not the best character in Sicario. And I would have loved to see more of his character in the movie. And when the sequel was announced, I was like, okay, great. And then it was announced that they were going to follow his character. I was like, fantastic. This is really, really cool. And now they're announcing that, of course, this is the case. They're going to follow his character. But now they're doing anthology films, which I think, again, it's a pretty cool idea, because you're not lending yourself to do sequels. You're not lending yourself to continue a story based off the previous film. Like you said, it's, you can go in and not worry about not, seeing the first film or the previous film, which is pretty cool. I mean, it would probably help your experience better knowing where this character has been and where, what he's done or she has done, depending on who they bring in. I think it'd be pretty cool. I think that would be a good way to kind of experience movies. But again, it's the idea itself is pretty cool. I like the idea of having kind of this anthology of Sicario films, the Sicario world. I don't know what to call it. So Soldado is aiming to begin filming, I believe, later this year, if not early next year. So we'll probably be hearing more about this anthology kind of world they're building around the time they start filming, or sometime next year. Beverly Hills Cop 4 has found new life and is officially set with new directors. Upstarts Aldi El Abri and Bial Falha, I think that's how you say those names, I'm not sure. The duo won the 2015 Toronto International Film Festival's Discovery Award with their crime drama film Black. And that actually impressed Eddie Murphy and producer Jerry Bruckheimer, because they set up a meeting between the two, the pair from Belgium, and they found out that Beverly Hills Cop was personally an important film for the filmmakers. So now they have joined Beverly Hills Cop 4 as the directors. Eddie Murphy, of course, will return for the fourth installment to reprise his role as Axel Foley, but other than that, we really know nothing about the film. There's been rumors that Foley's son will be introduced to the series and possibly take over the franchise, but those were rumors from years ago, or at least from last year, I believe as well. So there's no confirmation on what the film is going to be about. As for the directors, again, they're new to the scene. I haven't seen Black. I haven't even heard of Black. But for those of you who have seen it, maybe you're at the Toronto International Film Festival, or have heard about it more than me. Was it any good? Did you guys enjoy it? Do you think this is a good idea? Now, I think personally, it's a pretty cool idea. I think getting fresh blood and new blood to direct a franchise like this could help it, or can help them. They've won an award at the film festivals, which to some may be like, well, what's the big deal? Who cares? But it's still pretty cool that they're trusting upstarts, up and comers to pretty much take over this franchise that is very near and dear to a lot of people, and obviously is still a big part of Eddie Murphy and Jerry Bruckheimer's life. So we'll see what happens with Beverly Hills Cop 4. Now, I mentioned earlier in the podcast, way early in the podcast, that I was talking about the Ocean's 11 spin-off, Ocean's 8. Well, here it is. Gary Ross did an interview with Slash Film where he talked about the tone of the movie, and he confirmed that the film will be called Ocean's 8 and not Ocean's Ocho, as it's been called for a while. So this is what he said about the tone and style of the film, and compared it to Steven Soderbergh's original trilogy, saying, I think it's a pretty similar tone. Steven Soderbergh and I are incredibly close friends, and we would not have done this if we weren't. This is very much an extension and a continuation. He is a producer on the movie. In one way or another, this has been a 20-year conversation between Steven and I, collaborating in ways that the whole world doesn't know about. I've helped in the previous Ocean's 11 films. He shot second unit on The Hunger Games. I've done ADR lines for him, and he's read all my scripts. We're different filmmakers, obviously, so there will be those differences. But one of the things I'm drawn to is the amazing tone Steven was able to create, and we discussed that a lot. I am in no way trying to reinvent the tone, and I am thrilled and honored to be extending it. So this is pretty cool. I mean, he did mention that Steven Soderbergh did do second unit shots for The Hunger Games, and that was kind of a big deal when it came out, because that was around the time that Steven Soderbergh had said he was walking away from doing big screen movies. And I didn't even know that Gary Ross had done work on the Ocean's 11 movies until I read this quote, and I looked back and I was like, oh, I guess he did. So it's pretty cool. I mean, I think it's I think it would help that it's still a similar tone, but like you said, Gary Ross and Steven Soderbergh are two very different directors, and that's going to be the differences. You'll see the differences right away. When you're watching a Steven Soderbergh film, and I would assume I haven't seen enough Gary Ross films, but I would assume when you're watching a Gary Ross film. Steven Soderbergh has his own style, so you can imagine that his style is not the same as anyone else's out there. But I think that's pretty cool. I think that the fact that they're friends, and the fact that Steven Soderbergh has gone out and said that they've been working on this film for a while, this spin-off film, and it's not a reboot, it's not a remake, it's a spin-off. So the characters that appear in Steven Soderbergh's Ocean's 11 films could possibly, show up in this. We don't know. There's that rumor that George Clooney was going to appear, but it looks like they're going to hold off his cameo for the second film if this is a potential new franchise. Sandra Bullock is already set to star in the film. She's going to lead. She's playing Danny Ocean's sister, which of course was played by George Clooney. Helena Bonham Carter is already attached. Mindy Kaling's attached. Cate Blanchett is in talks to star in the film, and as is Elizabeth Banks. Now, Ross didn't confirm if Blanchett or Banks are indeed in the film, but it did sound like he already has an idea on who the cast already is, because he joked around saying that let's announce the lineup and break the internet. So I don't know if he just said it as a joke or whatever, but it sounds like he's excited for the film, and I'm pretty excited for the film. I liked Soderbergh's Ocean's movies, except for Ocean's 12. It was that good. And I think everyone involved kind of admits that Ocean's 12 wasn't that good of a movie. But I'm excited to see what they do with this. Ocean's 8 is expected to start filming early next year in New York, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more of the casting announcements pretty soon. Conjuring 2's Demon Nun is set to get her own spin-off. New Line Cinema sees The Conjuring as their own little franchise, as they should. It's done pretty well for them. And it looks like they will continue doing that with another spin-off of a character from The Conjuring 2. Much like the Annabelle doll, which got its own origin film, the Demon Nun will get her own spin-off film called The Nun. David Leslie Jones will write the script. The interesting move here is that the Nun wasn't almost in the film at all. The Demon Nun, as she is called in the credits, was a last-minute additional character that James Wan created during reshoots and additional photography for the film. He didn't even know what this character was going to look like. He originally imagined a horned demon creature thing, but he went with a demonic nun. No other information is available at the moment, but Annabelle, if you remember the creepy doll, came out a year after The Conjuring came out. So if they're following that same timeline, we can probably be hearing more about the Nun sooner rather than later. Now, the only thing I really have a gripe with here is, since the Demon Nun was a last-minute a last-minute creation, I don't know if, how they will bring her character out and how they will do the movie, since Annabelle was already believable as a film because the Annabelle doll already had this history, and it already was a thing. It wasn't a thing that created for the film. Now, the doll itself was a creation for the film because the real doll looks very different than the doll in the Conjuring films. But that was already a thing. The Demon Nun, again, was a last-minute creation from James Wan, a creepy last-minute creation, but a creation nonetheless. So I don't know if how they're gonna bring this character from the ground up. I'm sure it would be creepy as hell when we see it, but it should be interesting. If this is the case, every time a Conjuring movie comes out, we're gonna get a spin-off of a character. We'll see. And the Demon Nun, again, she's creepy as hell in the movie. There's that. And the Annabelle doll, again, was given the kind of the prologue essentially of the movie. And this movie does have a prologue, but the Conjuring 2, it does have a prologue. But the prologue for this movie, the material surrounding the prologue has already been done a dozen times. So I don't imagine they will do a spin-off of that here. And if you saw the movie, you know what I'm talking about. If you didn't see the movie, message me and I'll let you know what it is. And this is something I thought I was done talking about. The Crow remake is still trying to get made.
Why? Why would they do this?
I'm pretty sure I've mentioned on the podcast, at least I hope I've mentioned on the podcast, I know I've mentioned it on the Facebook page, that I was going to stop reporting on The Crow. Because after so many false starts, after so many delays, after so many actors that have come in and have dropped out because of all these false starts and delays, I just lost interest. I kind of don't care anymore. I won't believe there is a Crow remake until I see it in theaters. I don't care if they said, oh, we're starting filming. Oh, we've casted this person. Oh, here's a trailer. No, I'm only going to believe there's a Crow remake when I see it in theaters. So let's remind you of what happened. So the studio behind the film, Relatively Media, they filed for bankruptcy last year, which stopped, obviously, production from happening. And the film already had director, I think it was the fourth or fifth director they had gotten, and Corin Hardy, who directed the film The Hollow. And it got kind of messy. One of the producers of the film, Ed Pressman, fired Hardy from the project, which sparked a legal battle for some reason with the studio, with the rights holders, who claimed that the move undermined years of creative and financial investment in the film. Again, this was last year. And now there's reports that suggest that there might be a, quote, thaw in the legal battle, and that Hardy is back on board to direct. Now, Deadline, which broke this story, reports that there are still obstacles to overcome, and another studio could step into the mix as an active partner, which means, Relatively Media doesn't have to share the workload. And again, I've lost interest in the Crow remake. I wasn't necessarily too excited when I saw they were going to be remaking The Crow. You know, there have been actors and directors that have stepped in. I think I mentioned this with The Dark Tower when the last time we reported on The Dark Tower. When I started really getting into following the movie news cycle and started, going to websites and reading on this movie news and just falling, just getting into this thing, The Crow remake was one of those news items. It was The Crow, it was The Dark Tower, and it was The Lone Ranger. And of course, The Lone Ranger finally got made, and that was out of the way. Then it became The Dark Tower, and then it became The Crow. And now, The Lone Ranger came out. The Dark Tower is getting filmed right now, and now it's The Crow. The Crow is like the last cornerstone of news that I read when I first started getting into the movie news cycle. That's still there. It still hasn't been made, and I don't know if I even will believe a Crow remake is happening. I remember, I think one of the creators of the creator of The Crow, James O'Barr, I think that's his last name, he came out and said, this film, when the studio went into bankruptcy and stopped production, he said, this film is being made whether we have a lead star or not. That's not how a movie works. And I read that, I was like, that you can't possibly do that. So I don't know, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the Crow remake. Not even the fact that it's getting made, because again, I'm one of those people that doesn't bitch and moan about when a movie gets announced as a remake, because it's bound to happen. It's the world we live in now that remakes are going to get made. So I don't complain or bat an eye when something gets announced when a remake gets announced. But the Crow, it's like It feels like it's the actual character. Like, they kill the character and it keeps coming back to life. That's what it's like. And there's been so many actors attached to this thing. Luke Evans was one. Jack Houston was the last one before he dropped out. I think Tom Hiddleston was attached at one point, or in talks at one point. Even Mark Wahlberg was in talks at one point. They released like concept art like a long time ago, how the character looked, and the designs were all over the place. I didn't really like the designs too much, but I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not going to believe this movie is made until I see it in theaters. Like, actually in theaters. That's when I'll believe the movie's made. However, I do want to mention this because Hardy is moving on to other films, and this film sounds awesome. I would watch this film. He's directing a movie called Hellbent, and it is described as The Dirty Dozen Goes to Hell. And seriously, I would watch this film. I don't care how cheesy it would be. And I hope this film gets released in theaters. I really do. It says the movie follows a group of mercenaries imprisoned in a Brazilian jail who are murdered and led into the depths of hell by a priest who wishes to use their skills to kill Satan before he brings hell to earth. Come on! I would watch that. I don't care how cheesy it would be. This sounds awesome. I would totally watch this. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. I would totally watch the hell out of this movie. I really would. This got buried in the news item of the Crow remake. If they had just released this, I would have been totally game. They should have released this. They should have been flipped. This should have been the big news item, and the Crow remake should have been the one buried in this news. I don't know. I don't care about the Crow anymore. I'm more excited for Hellbent. Hellbent has just jumped on my most anticipated movies that who knows is gonna come out. I don't care. I'm gonna go watch it. All right, let's move on to some other crazy news. The final news item of the day: Helen Mirren has joined Fast and Furious 8.
Say what?
Because dreams do come true, ladies and gentlemen. Helen Mirren has joined the cast of Fast and the Furious 8, fulfilling her desire to join the series after she admitted she wanted to join the series and said that I think she even said, I will be in Fast and Furious 8. And this was like last year. Or earlier this year, she was like, I'm going to be in Fast and Furious 8. They haven't asked me, but I'm going to be in the movie. Who's going to say no to Helen Mirren? I'm not going to say no to Helen Mirren. Are you going to say no? I don't think so. So, there's no word on who she's going to play, but really, it doesn't matter. Because she's going to be in Fast and Furious. And it's utterly ridiculous, but utterly awesome at the same time. Now, of course, she's no stranger to action films. She did the Red films, where she played an assassin. So she's good at handling a gun, and she's good at an ensemble cast. And we don't know who she's going to play. There's ideas running rampant online of who she'll play, and I kind of have an idea on who she'll play. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't mind if this, speculation and early rumors on who she will play are true, but no, doesn't matter. Helen Mirren in a Fast and Furious movie. That's all that has to be said. So the film has already started filming. There's some videos online of them filming a crazy stunt, and I think it was in Atlanta. I could be wrong, with cars just launching themselves off a parking lot into the road. It looked pretty crazy, but it's already started filming. Of course, Vin Diesel will return, Michelle Rodriguez, Dwayne Johnson, which has a different look for Hobbs this time around. It looks utterly drastic, like a different Hobbs altogether. Jason Statham will return, Tyrese Gibson, Ludacris, Natalie Emmanuel, Kurt Russell, Scott Eastwood, Christoph Hivju from Game of Thrones, and Charlize Theron, who playing the villain of the movie. The villain apparently is named Cypher, which is pretty cool. It's a pretty cool villain name, and Charlize Theron's playing the villain, so why the hell not? Film is set to be released next year on April 14th. We're all going to go watch it, and the cast just keeps getting better and better. Alright, so let's get to this week's releases. We have one big limited release this week, which is Clown, which is directed by John Watts, who again will direct the Spider-Man Homecoming film. It is about a loving father who finds a clown suit for his son's birthday, only to realize that it's not a suit after all. Now, this film has actually been has been on the shelf for a few months now, and is just getting released. And I think one of the reasons why it's just getting released is because of Eli Roth, who came in and kind of pushed the idea of this film getting released. So this film has been done. It's been released in foreign markets already, and it's just getting a U.S. release date. So, it's getting a limited release. So check your theaters for it. It's getting mixed reviews at best. So just keep that in mind. The two wide releases that we have this week, however, are Central Intelligence, after he reunites with an old pal through Facebook, and mild-mannered accountant is lured into the world of international espionage. Directed by Rawson Marshall Thurber, who directed Dodgeball and We're the Millers, it stars Dwayne Johnson, Kevin Hart, Amy Ryan, and Aaron Paul. Film looks pretty funny. I'm not gonna lie, it looks pretty funny, and if the humor doesn't suit you, then at least you'll see a fat Dwayne Johnson in the film. Seriously, that scene always gets me. I don't care how many times they show it in a TV ad. I laugh every time. Alright, the next film, the last wide release, is Finding Dory. The friendly but forgettable blue tang fish reunites with their loved ones, and everyone learns a few things about the real meaning of family along the way. The voice cast includes Ellen DeGeneres, Albert Brooks, Ed O'Neill, Kathleen Olsen, Hayden Rollins, Ty Burrell, Idris Elba, Dominic West, Eugene Levy, and Diane Keaton. It's getting some good reviews. There was a real big worry about Finding Dory, about it being kind of rehashing the same kind of story and beat for beat moments, but it's getting some good reviews. I mean, it is Pixar, so I mean, they have a good way of fooling us and being like, yeah, I see you guys think that we run out of ideas. Nope, we're gonna make you feel again. So there's Finding Dory for you guys. All right, so this week's box office predictions. I didn't do the podcast last week, so there was no box office predictions from last week. I did do them, obviously, but again, I didn't put up the podcast and there wasn't enough recorded. So last week's actual box office was The Conjuring 2 at number 1, Warcraft at number 2, which actually really surprised me. Didn't make a lot of money, but still surprised me that it was in the top 3. Now You See Me 2 was at number 3, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows at number 4, and X-Men Apocalypse at number 5. So this week's predictions, I'm pretty sure there's no if, ands, or buts about it, ladies and gentlemen. Finding Dory will be number 1 in the box office this week. Number 2, I think Central Intelligence. At number 3, The Conjuring 2. At number 4, Warcraft. And at number 5, Now You See Me 2. Those are my box office predictions. Once again, Finding Dory, Central Intelligence, The Conjuring 2, Warcraft, and Now You See Me 2. I don't know how it's going to turn out this week. I think I'm pretty sure about number 1 and number 2 and number 3. 4 and 5 are a little little out there, but we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, those are my picks. Finding Dory, Central Intelligence, The Conjuring 2, Warcraft, and Now You See Me 2. So thank you guys so much for listening this week. Again, it's an early podcast, so if any big news items come out, be sure to check out the Facebook page. Link will be down below, or just go to facebook.com/moviepits. Also look for some written reviews this week on my WordPress account. Link will also be down below, so you guys go check those out. And I hope you guys have a safe, fun weekend. Obviously, there's a lot of bad in the world right now, but we gotta look after each other and be safe. So thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week once again, and I will see you guys next week, hopefully. And as always, go watch some movies.